So ever since the iPad Air 4 dropped, people have been asking me, should I get the Air or should I get the Pro? And the difference between those two devices was always pretty clear. But now that the iPad Air 5 comes with the M1 chip, is it still such an obvious decision? Let's ramble.
Hold up, things go wild when I pull up. They all on me like at once.
Hey, what's up guys? It's great to see you all again. And if you're new here, I'm Patrick, and this is where I ramble about tech and other stuff. So like I said in the intro, the differences between the iPad Air and the M1 iPad Pro, especially the 12.9-inch version, have always been pretty clear, and it was always easy for me to recommend one or the other depending on the user's needs. The Air was for casual consumption and light work, and the Pro was for, well, pro users. However, now that Apple slapped the M1 chip into the iPad Air, it became a lot more pro. And the differences between these devices in terms of use cases are not that black and white anymore. And a lot of you have been asking me my opinion on which one to get. Should you get the new M1 iPad Air 5 and maybe save some money, or is the M1 iPad Pro still the better option? Now, I've seen a lot of great comparison videos between the iPad Air 5 and the 11-inch iPad Pro, and we will definitely touch upon that as well. But for the purpose of this video, I wanted to pit the new iPad Air against Apple's big boy, the fully spec'd out 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and see if their flagship is worth the significantly higher price tag. We're going to talk about the design, we'll compare the display, we'll do a mic and speaker test to see which one is better. How do both tablets do for gaming? We'll talk about the cameras, the USB-C versus Thunderbolt port, battery life, compatibility with accessories, and of course we will compare prices and different use cases. And hopefully by the end of the video, you'll have a clear picture of which one is the better tablet for you. So let's start with the design, which is pretty much identical to the iPad Air 4. Same dimensions, aluminum frame, and of course the glass surface. The iPad Air 5 does have far more color options than the iPad Pro, which only comes in space gray or silver. I personally really love this blue, so much so that I didn't even put a dbrand skin on it, which is usually the first thing I do. It has the physical volume buttons. By the way, fun fact, the iPad mini and the Air both have smart volume buttons, which means the direction of the volume adapts to the orientation of the iPad. So no matter what direction you turn it in, the up button or the right button is always a volume up. The iPad Pro does not have that feature. The Air has 4 speaker grills, although that doesn't mean 4 speakers, but we'll get to that later. It has dual microphones, a spot for the 2nd gen Apple Pencil, a single camera on the rear, and of course the front-facing or selfie camera, and we will spend some more time on the cameras later as well. Unlike the iPad Pro, it does not have Face ID, but it does have Touch ID, and that is either a pro or a con, depending on your preference. I quite like Touch ID myself, but remember to scan your left index finger as well as your right one, because if you're using the iPad Air in landscape mode or inside the Magic Keyboard, the fingerprint scanner will be on the left-hand side. And you can, of course, use this iPad with the Magic Keyboard because the iPad Air comes with the smart connector dots on the back, which makes it compatible with all the same accessories. And lastly, the iPad Air 5 has USB-C, unlike the iPad Pro, which has the Thunderbolt port. But this USB-C port is actually twice as fast as the USB-C port on the iPad 4. It now has transfer speeds of up to 10 gigabits per second. Nevertheless, that pales in comparison to the Thunderbolt port on the iPad Pro, which delivers speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second, which is of course 4 times as fast. And it does really make a big difference. Let's copy the same video file from an external SSD onto the iPads and see how long it takes. The iPad Air takes about 5 seconds to copy the file, whereas the iPad Pro did it in less than a second. Seriously, I just blinked and it was there. Needless to say that both are plenty fast, and I really doubt that many people will actually feel the difference in their daily use. Anyway, something to consider if you move a lot of large files. The iPad Pro has a very similar boxy design. Obviously, this 12.9-inch version is a little bigger than the iPad Air 5. The Pro has 4 speaker grills as well, but in this case, all 4 are actually populated with speakers. It also has 5 studio quality microphones instead of just 2 on the Air 5, and of course it has dual cameras and a LiDAR scanner, which the iPad Air does not. Other than that, they are quite similar on the outside. The more important question, of course, is what are the differences under the hood? And to be honest, there aren't that many. Both tablets have the M1 chip. They both have an 8-core CPU, an 8-core GPU, and a 16-core neural engine. And those similarities are reflected in the benchmark test as well. They both use the same version of iPadOS, which means that the iPad Air can also make use of cool new features like universal control, and it works perfectly well for one of my personal favorite features, Sidecar. Well then, what's the difference? Well, for starters, there is the issue of storage. The base model iPad Air 5 comes with only 64 gigabytes of storage, which can be enough if you really only use your iPad for web browsing and some light work, some media consumption. But if you plan to store videos or you like to play a lot of games, forget about it. I mean, some games these days are 20 gigs in file size. And the next and only available option on the Air 5 is 256 gigs. And that means two things. One, there's no 128 gigabytes option, which for many people would be the sweet spot. And two, if you are a power user and you need more than 256 gigs, you're gonna have to go to the iPad Pro, which has way more storage options, including 128 gigabytes and all the way up to 2 terabytes. And if you do decide to go up to that 1 or 2 terabytes, you will also get 16 gigs of RAM, which is double that of the iPad Air 5. But even if you don't need that much storage, as soon as you need more than 64 gigs, it might be worth considering the iPad Pro because the 11-inch version is only $50 more than the higher storage model iPad Air, but with all the extra bells and whistles that come with the Pro. Apart from the storage thing, one major benefit of the iPad Pro over the iPad Air is the improved display, and that is especially true for this 12.9-inch model, which has that crispy mini LED display. The display on the iPad Air is a liquid retina display. It has a refresh rate of only 60 Hz and a peak brightness of 500 nits. The iPad Pro, on the other hand, has that 120 Hz ProMotion display with 600 nits typical brightness, 1000 nits max full screen brightness, and up to 1600 nits peak brightness in HDR mode. And once you're used to that 120 Hz refresh rate, 60 Hz really does feel slow and laggy. Between my iPhone 13 Pro and this iPad Pro, I really notice the difference when I do switch over to my iPad Air. Whether the lower refresh rate is going to bother you depends on what you plan to use your iPad for. For instance, I am totally fine with a 60 Hz on my iPad mini because I just use that to browse and watch some TikToks and do some reading. But if you like to play graphic intensive games or you're an artist, you will certainly benefit from the higher refresh rate on the Pro. Drawing with the Apple Pencil is noticeably smoother on the Pro. Speaking of the Apple Pencil, I do appreciate being able to use the same second-gen Apple Pencil between all my iPads. All I have to do is snap it onto the side of whatever iPad I'm going to use, and bam, it's paired, it's ready to go. And I do use my pencil a lot, especially for handwriting, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Paperlike. Paperlike is a screen protector, but it's much more than that. If you're like me and you like to use your iPad to take handwritten notes, Paperlike is a must-have. I don't like how slippery the Apple Pencil feels directly on the iPad's glass surface, and Paperlike mimics the feeling of writing on actual paper. You get more control of the pencil when writing, sketching, or drawing due to the Paperlike resistance and roughness. It makes your handwriting look much prettier, and it also drastically reduces glare and fingerprints. But because of the nanodots technology, it doesn't make your screen look grainy. If you use an Apple Pencil, I can highly recommend getting a Paperlike. Every order comes with 2 Paperlike covers and the application accessories. They offer worldwide shipping, so if you want to try it for yourself, there's a link in the description. Right, moving on to another significant difference between these two iPads, and that is the speaker system. The iPad Air has the same 4 speaker grills, but in reality, it only has a dual speaker system. The Pro has 4 directional speakers that adjust the audio according to the iPad's orientation, and they are also more directional, which will give you a big advantage in terms of stuff like gaming, where it's sometimes important to hear where the sounds are coming from. But even for non-gamers, if you use the iPad to listen to music or watch movies, the quad speaker system will give you a way more immersive experience and a richer sound.
Hold up, place go wild when I pull up. They all on me like a one time. Think I got what you need, well I have none. Hop off, you're a freak and I'm handsome. Slide up in the club like 2 chains. This snake is on top of the food chain. Sign out like a star, no new name. All these friends and my DMs.
Another substantial difference is the camera system. Both tablets have a 12 megapixel front-facing camera and both have center stage, but only the Pro has that true depth camera system. Combined with the additional studio mics, that should, in theory, provide a better video conferencing experience. So let's do a quick little audio and video test. Now you're listening to the iPad Air with the dual microphone and the 12 megapixel camera. And now you're listening to the iPad Pro with the 5 studio microphones and the technically better camera. I don't know about you guys, but to me, the Pro looks better and it sounds much richer. The cameras on the rear are also different. The Air has a single 20 megapixel wide camera, while the Pro has an additional 10 megapixel ultra wide camera, and of course that LiDAR scanner. Personally, I'm not that fussed about cameras on my iPads. I use them mostly for scanning documents, but the LiDAR scanner does add some real improvements to the camera, as well as some fun features. I'm very curious to see how Apple will develop the LiDAR sensor because I really think it has a massive potential. Anyway, if the camera system is important to you, the iPad Pro is the clear winner. The battery life on both tablets is actually pretty great. It's as advertised, about 9 to 10 hours. The biggest difference between these tablets is the price. While it's true that the higher storage option of the Air is awfully close to the 128GB 11-inch iPad Pro, and it might therefore justify getting it over the Air, comparing it to the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is a different story. The 128GB base model will cost you $1,100, which is quite a jump from the $750 you pay for the 256 gigs version of the iPad Air. And if you want that 16 gigs of RAM, you're looking at a price tag of at least $2K, which is an entirely different league. So should you buy the iPad Air or the 12.9-inch iPad Pro? The way I see it is this: if you use your iPad for media consumption, browsing the web, doing some light work, get the iPad Air 5 at 64 gigs. It is more than capable of all of that, and it will be for years to come. But if you need more storage than 64 gigs, I don't see why anyone would choose the iPad Air over the 11-inch iPad Pro. It's only marginally more expensive, but you get better speakers, a Thunderbolt port, more cameras, a flash, a LiDAR scanner, and if you care about it, Face ID. Okay, but then who should get the spec'd out 12.9-inch iPad Pro? Honestly, only a very small user group. If you're an artist or an absolute pro user and you must have that bigger and better display, or you have the money to throw around and you just want the best of the best, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is the best iPad on the market, no questions. Having said that, you're not going to be able to utilize that 16 gigs of RAM, so the only argument there would be for future-proofing, but something tells me that people that are willing to shell out $2K for an iPad will want the newer, shinier version of the iPad anyway once that drops. Guys, if you made it this far into the video, I salute you, and please type salute in the comments so I know who you are. If you enjoyed the video, please give it one of these. It really does help the channel. Subscribe for more content. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.